Throughout our history, humanity has been greatly inspired by insects in themselves, their structure, and their nests to elaborate our own creations. Engineers and architects owe many patents to the honeycombed nests of bees, the air conditioning systems of termite hills, and the underground cities of ants. Insects are capable of creating together nests of extraordinary ingenuity and complexity, so we can really say they are insect architects.
Hey, Christian, look, there's the nest. It's a nice one, too.
It's well perched up there, on a pretty weak branch.
There must be a fair number of insects, maybe 3,000. What do you think of that?
Oh, I'd say pretty much 3,000, yes.
Do you think you can get it down without too much difficulty? If you can get all of it to put it through the scanner, that would be a really fine operation. Well, good luck and watch out, eh?
There you are.
Thanks, Christian. It's heavy as well. In any case, it's truly magnificent. Take a look at that. You can clearly see the protective structure that shields the colony from bad weather. And we can really see what the workers have done. All the half circles that each worker has made when they've been to find vegetable fibres.
It's like our own ancestors who used earth and stone to build their houses, you see. It's the same material.
Here they actually go and find bits of wood which they mix with saliva, and that becomes paper.
Eric Darizet is a specialist in the study of the nests of social insects, hornets, wasps, bees, termites, and ants. To describe the ingenuity of their construction, he regularly observes them thanks to a scanner.
We compared different types of nests made by the Asian hornet, and we compared, for example, two nests, a spherical nest and a nest in the form of a droplet of water. The nest, which came from the outside and was therefore exposed to bad weather, has a protective hood, which gives the nest its cone shape and which protects the colony against the weather. Whereas the spherical nest, which is found indoors, has no protective hood. So in fact, the Asian hornet is capable of adapting the structure of its nest to the environment in which it's made.
In this way, some winged architects adapt their dwellings to all environments.
There the sheets are starting to appear. You can even see the pillars which are between each sheet. In fact, it's them that keep each of the sheets attached to the others. There you can distinguish clearly all the sheets constructed by the workers, with their alveoles pointing downwards.
So where do they pass between them?
In fact, there's a passage between the envelope and the periphery of the sheets which allows all the individuals passage from the top to the bottom of the nests. And there's a single opening at the base of the nest which allows the insects to go out. There, in fact, the role of each individual, each worker, is to go and look outside for nutrition to feed all the larvae, because each alveole contains a developing larva hatched by the queen. Other workers will seek out construction material to build a nest. For the nest, you see, at first it's very small, with the size of a ping-pong ball. It's the queen that builds that nest, which we call a foundation nest. Then she lays a first series of eggs in the little alveoles she has made, about between a dozen and 20 or so. The first generation of workers becomes adult, and after a while, they add a second sheet below that, which they will again enlarge afterwards, and so on. The nest will grow thicker with each sheet, and in height with the number of sheets which are added one on top of the others. There's a question which interests a lot of my colleagues, which is how can insects construct such complex structures? In fact, there's no workplace foreman, no plans. The only explanation that we can find is that work is automatically regulated. That's to say, each insect will participate in the construction by being influenced by the construction itself. By that, meaning that the construction in itself would be a major stimulus, and some insects would be sensitive to that stimulus, others wouldn't. And in function of that intensity, the insects would participate in the construction.
While observing a hornet's nest through the microscope, Eric Darizet has established that the nest is constituted of thousands of many-colored fragments. Each worker, attracted by the collective stimulus, will deposit in turn fragments of different materials. Observing termite nests using the scanner has revealed that these six-legged engineers are capable of including protective solutions for their habitats in their plans.
If we study an African termite hill using the scanner, we can visualize the position of all the chambers inside the structures, and we can locate the tunnels. So we suppose, it's the current hypothesis, that this has an application in defense terms. For example, we could have an ant colony which attacks the termite colony, and if the ants succeed in penetrating, piercing the external envelope, and getting into a chamber on the periphery of the nest, the termites just have to block a tunnel to defend themselves, which will serve to block the intrusion.
Thanks to Eric Darizet, insect builders now have their own exhibitions.
But that was in his garden.
No, it was in a farm. It was a car which was under a shelter. It got up to the seat level, and then after, you see, it went over the seat and started to fill up right to the roof.
And how long did that take?
There, this nest, it took about 2 weeks.
Over several years, some hornet and wasp nests get bigger and bigger without any real explanation why. The record is held by a nest of vespular wasps, which was over 2 meters high and 1 meter wide. For Eric Darizet, the study of nest construction is just a start, but this science is advancing.
Bees and wasps make six-sided alveoli. But why six-sided? This has been an enigma for a long time.
Thomas Hales is a brilliant American mathematician, and he thinks he has resolved this mystery.
The question that mathematicians have been asking is, why does the honeycomb have 6 sides? Anciently, there were 2 theories. One group felt that the hexagon had 6 sides because of the bee's 6 feet. The mathematicians of the day favored another theory, and that was that the honeycomb was somehow the most efficient shape possible for the hive.
It has taken 2,000 years and Thomas Hale to name the hexagon as champion of all polygons.
There's a simple model that can be used to show that a hexagon is better than a triangle. Imagine the 3 pieces in here as honey. I can take one of the pieces away and reassemble the other pieces so that they form a triangle. When they're put in the shape of a triangle, I have the same perimeter that I did before, but there's no longer room for the last bit of honey.
Bees learned long before us how to build a house with every room identical, using as few materials as possible. But how do they build such perfectly symmetrical combs? surely due to the cohesion within the colony and the specific task attribution. During the first days of life, the young bees clean the hollow cells of the brood, enabling the queen to lay again. After the third day, their glands, sited in the head, activate, and from then they can feed the larvae. From the 10th day, the wax glands develop to the detriment of the nourishing glands. The bees then form themselves into living scaffolding, bringing the beeswax up to the masons in charge of building the alveoli. The made-in bee is today the common point between an aircraft and a high-class ski. The bee's nest technique, using empty hexagonal alveoli placed in staggered rows, is used to reinforce the solidity of many structures without making it any heavier. Cars, telescopes, buildings constructed with light marble also owe many of their patents to bees. If the rigid cells of the bees can inspire us, many other insects have suggested different technological innovations. This science even has a name: bionics.
Bionics is first inspired by the living world, which can be understood from the word itself. More specifically, we work on bionics, which leads to progress in resistance. So we look for things that insects have, for example, to be more resistant. For a detailed example, that means that when an engineer is confronted by a problem, he'll go and seek out those insects which have been confronted with the same problems and what solutions they have developed to respond to that problem.
Whereas traditional wind generators only use 30% of wind energy, this new system is inspired directly by bees' wings, which greatly optimize efficiency. Perhaps tomorrow's wind generators will use nature as their model. Even the dung beetle, this excrement eater, has given the bionic scientists ideas. Gautier Chapelle has noticed that the feet of dung beetles are always clean, thanks to a microscopic feature that covers them. Thus, the structure has been copied to improve the blades of bulldozers, so that less earth sticks to them and they remain efficient. The microscopic surface of the dermal sheath, that is to say the carapace of the Namibian beetle, has also been copied by architects.
This is a beetle in the driest deserts in the world, which is nonetheless watered by the water vapor in the wind. And the special form of its dermal sheath allows drops of water to collect at first and then to drain through a kind of gutter into its mouth. And in fact, by imitating this structure, uniquely its form, we can collect water in the same way. This can especially be applied, in any case potentially, on buildings in similar climatic environments, such as the Canary Islands, the coast of Chile, or the South African coast.
Another beetle possesses a forest fire detector because it needs burnt wood to lay its eggs. Today, engineers have reproduced that detection system to automatically detect fires in intelligent buildings. The dermal sheath of insects is a true source of inspiration all round.
In the buildings of the future, we'll be able to optimize the circulation of fluids, especially water based on the veins of insects. Dragonflies, for example, supply a very good model, and that's really a way of minimizing energy expenditure associated with fluid circulation in buildings. We can also optimize information circulation on the internet through the inspiration offered by ant circulation, by the way in which the ants bring back their harvests to the ant nests while reducing the distance of their travel as much as possible.
To always be able to find the shortest route to this box of food, the ants have a secret. They move about and leave chemical signals behind them, pheromones. Eventually, the straightest route to the food box will be more marked, and the ants will naturally choose the path with the most indicators. Engineers have managed to retranscribe these chemical signals into mathematical algorithms. To avoid traffic jams in the cities of the future, ant algorithms will be applied. In fact, when traffic is fluid, ants leave a dense chemical trace which indicates the right direction. When the traffic is slow, the mark is weaker. It's enough to favor the strong traces to be able to avoid the jams. Routers direct information in the same way on the net, and can also do the same with vehicles to the more fluid paths. While urbanist ants use pheromones, they also guide ant architects to conceive their underground cities. The very small space between chambers is obtained thanks to construction plans left by their chemical signals. By watching butterflies very closely, bionic scientists have also found strange innovations for the use of the future's buildings.
In butterflies, we found all these irised colours which are due to microscopic relief and which already have found applications. For the efficiency of solar panels, these have been made more efficient by the inspiration of the principles of physics found in these very special butterfly pigments. There have been other applications, still with using irised colours, which are found, for example, in a mobile phone, which allows us to obtain the same level of light with less energy.
Is it possible to use these natural butterfly pigments as models for pigments used in the building industry, in construction, in paint?
Yes, in fact, it's possible. It's already used as a model. There are teams working on that since effectively the majority of the pigments we use are toxic, and this accumulates in traditional paints. So it really is an enormous alternative domain opening up here.
Are moths as interesting as butterflies?
Yes, they're interesting at other levels. Firstly, because their eyes allow them to see at night and have therefore interesting optic properties, again for solar panels. And in other ways, they have very sensitive chemical receptors which are able to locate the females kilometers away by odor. And that allows us to develop sensitive chemical receptors.
Luc Schuiten is a visionary architect who has used bionics and nature as his inspiration.
When I imagined this biohabitat, I thought of this dragonfly wing. I imagined that maybe one day we'd be able to make this kind of thing. What do you think?
I think that yes, we're going to be able to do that. It's a little like the transparent substance of the future. It's sugar-based, it's quite simple chemistry. It seems doable, but it's going to require commitment. And for the moment it's true, we're not yet working on it, but I certainly believe in it. Chitin can also serve as a model for armours. You can have hard chitin inspired from, by example, that of beetles, but it can take many forms, right up to the surfaces that are the most transparent, inspired by dragonfly wings, to make membranes, skins, which can become translucid through to transparent.
Perhaps our great-grandchildren will live in cities inspired by Luc Schuiten. While waiting for that perspective, tour the world in these exhibitions which fascinate young people.
In this type of construction, we use all the natural materials we have, and God knows there's a lot of them. All of the walls here could be made from the chitin of dragonfly wings. We could have transparent materials. Spiders make thread which is highly resistant, and so do silkworms.
But when you say you're going to use the silk of the silicon to cover a house, that will take an enormous amount.
Yes, of course. But in Lyon there were enormous home factories that did that wove these threads and made super-resistant fabrics. We could easily start from that savoir-faire and do that without pollution, without hurting the planet. How can we manage to produce and be as efficient as a spider can be when it weaves its thread. Its thread is stronger than our steels at the same scale, but the spider can do this without factories, without trucks, without mining the earth. Lots of things. The spider needs no petrol. The spider does it all with its little stomach and with what it takes from the environment. So how can we manage to do that without going into the industrial chain or by completely integrating our systems with natural production? The lighting in our buildings could very well come from a system of bioluminescence. We've got insects like glowworms, which make this very, very intense light, and which could be used in analogous processes. Not by using glowworms, obviously. That would be a bit complicated, but by using that chemistry, that way of functioning. And you can imagine the light that would give, that would be enough for our comfort.
Avoir le confort nécessaire optique.
Insects graciously give up their patents to us. It's up to us to discover their applications. They have no internal skeleton, but an external envelope, the exoskeleton, which protects them.
When a man runs, he uses 50% of his recoverable energy the moment he hits the ground. So that this energy wouldn't be lost, I imagined working with an exoskeleton, which would be very close to that of grasshoppers, because they recover that energy with a kind of spring.
Grasshoppers are an endless source of inspiration for Luc Schwieten. He is even thinking about developing a new kind of tricycle inspired by the ergonomy of their legs in moving and limiting their efforts. Convoys of pine processionaries have inspired him with the concept of the caterpillar train, where wagons join and move linked together in a linked line. This principle of autonomous movement, or in convoys, would allow an energetic gain for the transport at the heart of our cities. Le train modulaire takes its inspiration from the way in which bees and ants communicate. It uses its antennae to transmit to the exterior the trajectories of different modules.
Luc Schwieten is really a visionary architect. He's an architect of life and also one of those rare people who lets us project ourselves forward into future cities that have completely integrated bionics. These are positive cities that make you want to live there.
It's been more than 300 million years that insects have lived in harmony with the Earth. They're experts in durability, so we have to learn how to watch them to get answers to our questions.
The first cities were invented by ants, well before man. They were organized in vast colonies, which were a little like our towns. In imagining that city, I took off from that idea. The ants have greenfly farms, which might correspond to hen runs in that city. Here there are vegetable plots, which might be a bit like the vast mushroom fields that the ants cultivate. And then we'd have in this part here something which is like the ants' storage area. That means the silos and granaries where we store our food for the rest of the year. And then the rest of the habitation develops to be able to house the people.
Ant cities are a perfect example of remarkable subterranean megacities, which have the advantage of being perfectly air-conditioned and are thus truly ecological. We could imagine similar habitats in extremely hot or cold lands, where according to the season one lived beneath or above the ground. Walter Schenkel is trying to understand how the ants, without a project head and without a building plan, can build such complex and varied forms of nests. Some nests reach a depth of 4 meters, which on a human scale is the equivalent of an underground city 7 kilometers deep.
How does natural selection build this set of behaviors into the individual ants so that their interaction with the environment and with each other produces these species-typical nests? That's just unknown at this point. But it is the central question.
Hey, Kevin, here's a harvester ant nest that might be pretty good. What do you think?
Yeah.
To make the nest skeletons, Walter uses aluminium heated to 670 degrees.
Oh, it's rising. I think we got it.
Contact with the molten aluminium could be dangerous for non-specialists.
Okay, lay it down. We got it. Watch out.
In this underground city, 8,000 harvester ants once lived. Some ants have invented the spiral staircase, others the worm drive, or even the flying shuttle. Walter began a titanic task in his inventory of their different kinds of habitat. Ants didn't wait for man to learn to sew. Weaver ants even invented the weaving shuttle. Turning themselves into a living shuttle, ant larvae donate both their silk and their lives. Australian weaver ant larvae secrete silk thread from a gland under the mouth. The worker seamstress presses the larvae between its jaws so as to reel the precious thread via combs on its feet. Ants are the perfect urbanists. They know in fact how to adapt the facades of their environment to perfectly integrate themselves into their environment. Thus they use different kinds of leaves. Thousands of woven threads enable the building of extremely light but resistant leaf structures, giving architects interesting ideas.
Bring it this way. Bring it this way. Keep going, keep going. Bring it this way. This structure is based on the weaver ant design. The weaver ants collect sticks and leaves and all kinds of things that they find, and they put it together with pieces of silk, just like we did with this structure.
The architect Eugene Sui has used this principle to create very light towers capable of bearing great weight. By borrowing ideas from nature, he's seeking ways to produce environment-friendly housing that's economic, quick, safe, aesthetic, and natural. Some of his projects incorporate the technical know-how of ants in air conditioning and ventilation. In California, earthquakes, fire and floods are a constant worry. There too, the ants are a source of inspiration.
The shape of the building is very much like the ant body. This building is shaped like that because it has to be very strong in an earthquake. And also it has this rough texture.
One wonders which ant bit him. From ant sting terraces with panoramic views to honey ant round jars, Sui's whole world has been inspired by them.
I have to imagine myself being an ant to begin to understand why and how the ant made certain decisions to create the incredible habitats that it creates. And so by studying those habitats, it's influenced my architecture because the logic and the reasoning behind the development of these habitats could be directly applied to creating logical habitation for human beings.
For these buildings, Eugene Sui was inspired by the sugar jars, which are made up from some ants nicknamed honeypot ants because of their honey-like taste. To survive droughts, these ants have put an ingenious system in place. Their workers harvest nectar from a tree. They then transform themselves into living walking jars and regurgitate their precious nectar in times of famine.
What's interesting is that the angle of 15 degrees, which parallels the angle of the tunnel passageways for ant colonies.
This project for a bridge linking Africa and Europe via the Straits of Gibraltar is not a pipe dream. Ants are capable of overcoming obstacles just as big in ant terms to make genuine suspension bridges. To do this, thousands of ants form themselves into cables and girders. Once the civil engineering is finished, the Queen can be carried around on her sedan chair, and thousands of workers can use the bridge safely to cross the obstacle. Termites have nothing to be jealous of ants about when it comes to building. Macrothermous termites build cathedrals, and humnivore termites build temples. For the Aboriginals and the African tribes alike, the mystery of these architects of nature is believed to be a gift from the gods. Strangely, termites which destroy everything they encounter religiously avoid some varieties of shrubs. Others seem to worship the tree trunks in which they live. Some termites build mounds which seem to defy the laws of gravity and logic. In the steppes of Australia, magnetic termites never lose their bearings. Their homes are just a few centimeters wide from north to south, but several meters long from west to east. The burning midday sun only strikes a very small surface of the mound, while the morning and evening rays warm both sides. To get the temperature they prefer and make the most of their air conditioning, the termites live on the east side in the morning and the west side in the evening. Made in termite land, air conditioning equipment inspires today's architects. Termites may not have central heating, but they do have ideas. Their buildings have all mod cons and even air conditioning. The way it works is simple. Termite cathedral chimneys can be nearly 8 meters high. Made of earth, the chimney heats up during the day. As hot air rises, the chimney draws the cooler air out of the mound. At night, the termite's home is warmed by the heat stored in the ground during the day. Always focused on energy saving, British architects have taken on termite engineers. For example, the model for the Nottingham Inland Revenue Centre was a termite mound. A gigantic glass chimney controls fresh air distribution to the offices. At the University of Leicester, enormous 13-metre-high chimneys pull down fresh air which emerges directly from grids under the students' seats and bottoms. Engineer-architect Sandy Halliday has just found a new job for termites as trench diggers.
I've been really interested for some time in the prospect of studying animal architecture, but I couldn't see why anybody would give us research funding to study what's essentially spit and shit.
Termite droppings make excellent cement. They contain non-degraded sugars which act like superglue. To be able to avoid oncoming traffic in corridors made strictly to their size, the termite concrete mixers make garages like on mountain roads. In front of each building site, a soldier on duty protects the concrete layers. After identifying the exact place with their antennae, the worker termites bring in the grains of sand and suddenly turn round to lay the cement in the gap.
In the future, we might find ourselves able to produce something like the kind of environmentally friendly cements which termites themselves presently produce from their own abdomens. And that would be an enormous step forward into a more environmentally friendly construction industry.
For Sandy, man has never invented anything. Not cement and certainly not skyscrapers. A 3-metre-high termite mound would be a building towering 3 kilometres. African civilizations have copied termite mound architecture for a long time, in particular in the mosques of Burkina Faso and Mali.
Yes, I'm here to present the project we've been doing on animal architecture. I'm expected. The manager's expecting me.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Sandy is using a model to demonstrate her intriguing project based on animal intelligence to the Edinburgh Zoo directors.
The building that we've been looking at is based on the principles of animal architecture, in particular the termite mound, which forms this central core here. More research to go into that to figure out what we can really learn in terms of how to bond it. And this here will be the cafe and restaurant looking at this fabulous view.
Ants and termites have already inspired the most visionary architects, like the work of Gaudi in Barcelona. For Gaudi, the secret of beauty is in nature. Insects, he emphasized, practically never use a straight line. Generally, building insects are organized in a society. Although spiders are solitary, they are excellent builders all the same. Whom among us has not been struck by the magnificence of a spider's web? Not all spiders weave in the same way. Some knit silk webs with variable geometry with threads that are further or closer apart. Other species can produce up to 8 different sorts of silk, depending on how it is to be used. Silk for the web, for security, for cocoons, for wrapping up prey, etc. This variety is made possible by the existence of different glands, each producing silk of a different quality. The silk is in fact a twined rope made up of 15 to 20 threads. These microfilaments intertwine to form an assemblage 1,000 times finer than a hair. These threads are amongst the finest known to science, and no man-made machine to date would be capable of reproducing them. When the silk trap is magnified several thousand times with the microscope, we can see the balls of glue that enable the prey to be held more easily. In addition, the thread cannot give way. It is twice as solid as our Kevlar, which is used for bulletproof vests. It is acid resistant and more elastic than nylon. Spider silk needs to be extremely strong because the spider regularly leaps into the void to attain the speed required for efficient web spinning. For decades, many researchers have been attempting to copy the super properties of spider silk.
I'm not really Spider-Man. We study spider silk because it has the potential to produce products that really can benefit mankind. In the Spider-Man movie, the diameter of the silk that he shoots out is actually much bigger than he needs. Our calculations are that for most of the things that he was doing, the diameter he needed is 1 or 2 millimeters, not. This one should be ready to silk today.
Professor Randolph V. Lewis has a miniature breeding farm for Nephilis spiders. These giant spiders can spin webs larger than 1 meter in diameter. They can provide up to 500 meters of silk thread in a harvest.
So in order to produce commercial amounts of spider silk, it's really not possible to use spiders. The problem is they're territorial and we simply can't collect large enough quantities for any sort of a commercial application.
The artificial and industrial production of spider silk fiber is the subject of research of a dozen teams around the world. The solution, according to Randolph V. Lewis, is genetics and plants. By inserting specific spider genes into plants, Professor Randolph V. Lewis seems to have found the ideal factories for the mass production of spider silk proteins. Other research teams have chosen bacteria or even goat milk for duplicating spider silk proteins genetically and industrially. However, Randolph V. Lewis is more convinced by his superplants.
We chose alfalfa plants because they don't carry viruses and other kinds of infective material like might be found in bacteria. And secondly, there's a fear of viruses if we produce the silk in animals.
This is the silk thread produced from a mixture of plants. The fiber produced from plants is much more elastic than nylon and totally biodegradable. This already interests cable manufacturers for suspended bridges, but could also become part of the manufacture of biomaterials for buildings. Stretch tests prove the super quality of the fiber, 5 times stronger than steel, twice as flexible as nylon, and able to be stretched by 40% before breaking. Are scientists now rivaling what 400 million years of spider silk evolution has produced? Professor Bertrand Kraft also has a profound interest in the virtues of spider webs.
Spiders capture insects with their webs. The webs are nets, and of course the number of insects captured depends on the size of the net and the number of available prey. We've observed that in a plentiful environment, spiders build small webs, and in a poor environment, spiders build big webs, that is, big nets. So why this adaptation? For economical reasons, because the web is made entirely of silk. Silk is protein, and protein is expensive.
In Guyana, to save their silk proteins, certain species of spiders have even grouped together to live in the one gigantic web. An association that goes against nature, since spiders are usually cannibal and 99% are solitary. Thanks to this strange association, they are able to capture prey more than 700 times their own weight, whereas solitary spiders rarely attack game bigger than themselves. Through vibrations in the web, the attack signal is given, and dozens of spiders run to do battle. The meal will be shared by the whole community.
The spider society is anarchy, without structure, hierarchy, king, or chief. And yet it functions in a harmonious way, enough to send chills up the spines of politicians, since there's no need for hierarchy.
However, the spiders appear to obey and follow without argument the stick that Bernard Kraft waves like an animal trainer. In fact, all they do is follow the vibrations propagated by the silk. Their ability to detect movements ranging from a millimeter to a nanometer is due to the multitude of hairs and sensors distributed over their bodies and their 8 legs. To perceive the vibrations better, the spiders move forward in jerky movements. At each pause, the hairs and sensors pick up the slightest movements and tremors of the web. In a way, the entire structure of this society of social spiders is hanging by a thread. Without politicians or architects, they build webs that can measure up to 50 meters long. In contrast to perfectly geometrical webs, these look chaotic. No obvious architectural rules, and yet this immense web tent is held up by guy lines. On closer inspection, we find the same principles of tension used in suspended bridges. These spiders can make their web without an overall vision, each one being content to fill in an empty space or add a thread here and there to increase the strength of a supporting cable. This interlacing of webs is chaotic merely in appearance. It is the silk that enables the spiders to communicate, to organize themselves, and thus create these web superstructures.
We came up with the idea that each individual must react in the same way as its neighbors to the vibratory information transmitted by the silk. Based on this idea, we created a computer model using 1. The principle that the spiders do not fight amongst themselves, 2. That all the spiders react in the same way to the information, and that there is cooperation, in other words, a sort of social intelligence.
Should we therefore add spiders to the list of social insects? Maybe not, but arachnoids deserve in any case the title of architects as much as do the ants, the bees or termites. The cities of tomorrow will use bionics, and social insects will contribute enormously.